Mike, what's going on, man?
What's good?
Not much, man. Just taking it easy. How's everything been?
It's been good, man. It's been a journey, you know? Been a real journey. Yeah.
Where you grew up at, Mike?
I grew up in a small town, rural area in Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. I call it rural because it was still a lot of remnants of the southern way of doing things in the country, the way they did things in the southern way. People who were established in Savannah, the sugar factory, they had a sugar factory there, you know, they had a steel industry there, but other than that, you know, there were meager means to, you know, make a living in Savannah. I grew up in a single parent household, had like seven of us. I'm next to the youngest of 7 children. My mother was the breadwinner. My mother was always the one who took care of us. She took care of us. My father was kind of like in and out of the picture because he had issues himself. You know, he was a Vietnam era vet, and he came back to the United States with an addiction. Came back with a heroin addiction. Grew up in the ghettos, in the projects. Early on, I found a way to be kind of delinquent. I found a way to be unruly, you know, no supervision, you know, and the only examples of strong male presence were people who were they had street cred, like the pusher, the pimp, the player, all of that stuff. That was relevant in my growing up. So I thought that everything was cooler in life than the conditions that I was living in. So I always, in my mind, I always drifted into wanting to be other than who I was. I always thought that somebody else had a better hand than I had. So I grew up delinquent, man. I grew up shoplifting. I grew up breaking in houses. I grew up very, very unruly, in and out of the juvenile facilities, man, from 11 years old, you know. Like, I was a studious kid, though, in school. Very studious, very book savvy. Like, I loved information, man. Like, I soak up information like a sponge, and I was excited about learning. But it seemed like the guys who sat in the back of the class, who threw the spitballs, who disrupted the class with jokes and laughter, seemed like they got more attention than me. I sat in the front. I would raise my hand all the time. I would answer the questions. I would bring home straight A's, but I didn't have much friends, right? And I got picked on, and I got, you know, they call it joning in Georgia. That's when they make jokes about you, about your clothes, your shoes. I had nappy hair when I was growing up. You know, my mom couldn't afford us haircuts on a regular basis, and she would take us to the barbershop on a consistent basis. So naturally, my hair would be peasy, and I would get teased about it. And I didn't have the latest fashion like everybody else had the latest fashion, and you know, so I was like really uncomfortable in the skin that I was in when I was a kid. You know, kids are cruel. You know, we tease each other and we treat each other in a way that is counterproductive to development. It's really counterproductive. It made me feel like I was alienated from the very people that I was growing up with. And it was, on one hand, it was the crowd of the ones who didn't fit in, me and the rest of the little friends that were outcasts. And then there was the crowd of the ones who fit in because they was doing everything against the grain. So I wanted to get into that crowd. So I started drinking alcohol, started drinking beer. First it started off huffing paint thinner and, you know, just wanting to fit in, wanting to blend in, wanting to be accepted, wanting them to stop picking on me, you know. Let me hang with y'all. Let me go with y'all wherever y'all going. Let me be a part of that. Like peer pressure sucked me in, and school was no longer important. My friends became more important than me being studious. Even though my mother was the one who instilled that education is your key. Education will get you out of these conditions. You have a mind. She would always tell me, you have a mind on you, Michael. You have a mind. And you can be whatever you want to be. You can be a doctor. You can be a lawyer. You can be a banker. She instilled those ideas in me when I was maybe 8, 7, because I was bright. And she knew I was bright. I would bring home straight A's. And she was like, wow, look at you. Like I excelled beyond gifted amongst my siblings. And my mother recognized it immediately. And it set me apart with even my siblings. Like she favored me above most of my brothers. And that brought about a lot of envy and jealousy, like growing up. So not only did I have enemies outside, I had enemies in my own home, So imagine being a kid growing up in a seemingly hostile world. So like normally that created an element of low self-esteem, low self-worth. It created the element of not fitting in, not belonging, not being good enough. The traumas of molestation and the traumas of like verbal abuse. Because my mother was very, very strong and forceful. She had 6 boys. She couldn't let up on us. But there was a time when Wayne Williams was accused of grabbing these little kids in Atlanta, Georgia. And I can remember that there was a lot of concerns about where we were going, the kids. I still gravitated to the streets, and I can remember getting in trouble, man, getting in trouble for shoplifting and going to the youth detention and taking my mother through those changes of going to court for her child and being questioned as to why is he responding like this? Why is he doing these things? And they never asked the question, does he have a father in his life? They always made it seem like my mother was responsible for both parts of parenting. Like that was the norm of society. They never questioned where the father was. And that was my issue. I didn't have a male figure that was strong enough of presence in my life to sit me down and say, listen, the decisions you're making right now are going to affect you when you get older. So you need to make you need to make informed decisions from right here where you are right now.
So your uncles didn't play a role?
My uncles, they were up north. I was born in Brooklyn. Like my mother moved all of us down to Georgia. That's her hometown. Because she was afraid that the big city would suck us in. She had 6 boys. And she didn't want my oldest brother and the one after him, she didn't want them getting involved in gang violence or in gangs at that time. But there was a little gang activity in New York at that time. So she moved us down to Georgia. So I my uncles, they all lived in New York. I can remember when I was a young, I think I was like 5 or 6 years old, one of my uncles was murdered. He was he moved heroin, and he was murdered in my mother's house, He was shot on the balcony, and that's the first time I seen a person die, and I was too young for it to traumatize me, but later on in life I found out that it did have an effect on me, witnessing that happen. But yeah, I didn't have my uncles. They were like they were all in New York, and most of them had their own issues that they were dealing with. That they drank alcohol very heavily, and they all had they died off from diabetes from drinking. They had drinking problems, and they were instrumental in my early childhood development. But as I got older, I was just like a loose cannon, doing what I wanted to do, And my older brother and the one under him, they were no more an example for me because they were getting involved in the street activity themselves. So I was just doing what was in front of me anyway, So like just following suit with what was in my environment, So growing up, man, I did juvenile bits, and I continued to progress in my drug use, man. So it elevated from alcohol, paint thinner, huffing paint thinner, to marijuana. And I can remember when I became like 14 years old, man. This is when freebase cocaine comes on the scene in our community. Freebase cocaine. And I had a good friend of mine that I grew up with, that he found a connect. And the connect gave him so much of this stuff. And he couldn't move it on his own. So he gave his crew, which was us, like 6 of us, gave all of us cocaine. Told us to move it, come back to him, and re-up. So I found out how powerful this drug was. Before I ever ingested it in my system, I found out how powerful it was. It was powerful that it got me into the ability to buy my own school clothes. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about buying my own sneakers now. I'm buying shell-toe Adidas. I'm buying suede Pumas. I'm buying Adidas sweatsuits. I'm gonna dress like Run DMC, and I'm dressing like the hip-hop artists, because hip-hop had just hit the scene too. At the same time, hip-hop hit the scene, crack cocaine was just in its developmental stages. Like when I jumped off the porch, you had to manufacture your cocaine into rock form. They called it freebase. But and you had to be in certain circles to be a part of that scene. Like you either had to have the coke, or you had to know the person who had the coke. It was in the need to know basis. It wasn't as accessible as it became when crack hit the scene. Crack was a different thing. It was like somebody already had rocked it up for you. They cut it up and they dispensed it in that form. But back when I jumped off the porch, you had to cook it yourself. You had to find a way to change it and chemicalize it and turn it into a hard form. But when crack hit the scene, man, everything changed in my community. Everything changed. I found out the power of the drug because now I'm getting money. I'm getting money like I played my hand at robbery. I did a few armed robberies, but I never liked the element of danger that brought. And I knew guys who were going to prison, and I knew some of them who got shot. I knew some of them who had gotten killed for armed robbery. So that was like a slippery slope for me. But this dope thing, this drug thing here, like I can navigate this because it's all about, consignment, like in the gift of gab and how you fit yourself into to mainstream society, the street life. How do you navigate this now? Well, I had something that they wanted, so I became like somebody that was important to them, especially to the dope fiends, but more importantly to the people who were movers and shakers, the people who had money. So, I don't know, during the course of selling and being involved in that environment, curiosity. I'm telling you, my life changed at 14 when I began to smoke cocaine. And it changed, and
that was freebase.
Yes, that was freebase at that time. It changed, and from that point, it shaped the destiny that my life would go into. From that point, from 14, and school was not that much more important. When I went to school, I just showed up to dress fly, to look real good, and I would leave during lunch hour. I would leave. Needless to say, I became addicted immediately to cocaine. I became addicted to it immediately. It changed my whole persona. It made me more aggressive, like aggressively talking to women, like feeling like I was worthy, feeling like I was a part of the in crowd. It just changed my whole demeanor. It put me in a state of mind where I felt like I was invincible, right? And for a while, it made me feel like I was on top of the world. I had money that I spent like I wanted to. Like I had the latest fashions, man. And, I had guns, I had a car. I had things that I never thought I could afford, And of course, my mother, she was inquisitive about where this money was coming from, where these clothes coming from. I'm not buying them for you. What are you doing? You don't have a job. You're not working. So, of course, her dissatisfaction with where my life is going now, like I'm not going to school, right? I'm not coming in the house at a respectable time now. I'm 14. I'm 14 years old. I'm under my mother's roof. I'm not going to church anymore because she grew me up going to church. I'm not going to church anymore. Like the street life called my name and I answered. I answered that call. So my life was changing. By the time I was 18, I was in prison. By the time I was 18, I was in prison. I was doing my first bit. And, we become the most reformed people when we're incarcerated. And we look at how the events brought us to where we are now. And then we look at the people around us, and we see that they're no different than we are. We see that they have faced the same circumstances that we faced and wound up in the same place. So that should be enough. That should be enough for you to vow that you're going to do something different. But I had this addiction, man, that I didn't know I had. I had this addiction. I had this love affair with cocaine. Like, as soon as I got out, that's the first thing I wanted. I'm talking about that's the beeline. I took a beeline from the prison to the spot because I needed to get a taste of cocaine. I didn't know I had an addiction. I didn't know that abstinence didn't cure the disease that lives within me. I didn't know that. So there was this vicious cycle that went on with me using. Like I live to use and I use to live. Like the high and the feeling of being on top of the world, that ended. That ended long before the party ended. Like, I started facing consequences for my using. Year after year after year, homelessness, joblessness, pennilessness. Like, my mother was so embarrassed, man. She was so disappointed in me. Like, but my disease of addiction didn't matter. It didn't care about who I let down. I let me down. You know what I'm saying? And if I didn't care about letting myself down, what would I care about letting somebody else down? I had a disease of addiction. And the first time I found out what was really going on with me, because I had done maybe 3 prison stints before I was able to sit down. I think I was 29 years old when I came to and went into my first treatment facility. Like 29 years old when I went into my first treatment facility. And when I first heard about 12-step recovery. Like, I'm not going to talk about that because that needs to remain anonymous. But I think I was 29 years old when I first heard people talking about coming from the same conditions that I came from and finding a way out, right? And the hope that they shared that you too can find a way out. But I don't really think that I was ready. I still thought that I could outsmart my diseased thinking. I still thought that I could lick this thing. Like, it ain't gonna get me like it got the rest of them. But every time the evidence, the consequences, the condition of my life showed me, you lose at this game. You always lose at this game. This game is not gonna open up where you find the upper hand over your addiction. When you play, you pay every time. So the only way for you to succeed at this thing is by abstaining, taking your hands off of it, and finding out how this disease affects your thinking. Like, I don't know, man. I first came into the process of recovery, man, at 29, and I stayed for a few years, and I left, and I came back, and I stayed for a few years, and I left, and I came back, and I stayed for a few more years. So what I found out in those stints was that I liked the other side more than I liked using. I had grown to that point after having faced so much consequences, man. Like, and then I began to age, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't no spring chicken anymore. I couldn't jump in and out of prison, man, and get bounced back. Now, I'm a guy who has done some of everything when it comes to far as being in position to succeed. I worked for a law firm, man, downtown Miami. I worked for a high-power law firm, like convicted felon. Like, I think addicted people are some of the most resourceful people on the planet. Like, I had to be resourceful while I used. Like, I had to get up every morning and find a way to get high all day long without having a dime. And I made that happen every day. I made that happen every day. So on this side, the resourcefulness comes in handy because it puts you in position of where you can excel past the person who probably have not faced some of the consequences that you faced and found a way out. You know, you hear some of the people complaining about some of the things that you wish were your problems. You know what I'm saying? And you wish that was all you had to deal with. You wish that was the only thing you had going on during the run of a day, because that would be like cake to you. But for an addicted person, we constantly got to be on guard for the unguarded moment, the thinking, the self-obsession. The core of the disease of addiction is me thinking about me more than I think about anybody else, right? I'm with me all the times of the day. So I'm so consumed with who I am that I will shut out the world and become totally consumed with self. And I would run over whomever and whatever I have to run over in order to get the bottom line, to get my bottom line, like to get my needs met, what have you, whatever it is. Like, I don't have the capacity, if I'm not vigilant, to think of you and how you're affected by what I'm doing. Like, that's what made me get out of prison one time, and before I could make it home to my mom, who sent me money on my commissary every month, who sent me packages for a stint of 2 years, and wrote letters to me. Before I could make it home to hug her neck, I was in the spot getting high upon my release. Before I could make it home. That's what addiction did to me. That's what my addiction did to me. And for the life of me, I needed to find a way to understand how I operated. I needed to find a way to understand how how I move in society, man. Like, most of the times, this disease goes undetected, right? And it's hard to diagnose if you're doing self-diagnosis, right? And the only thing that made my life made me able to put a finger on some of the things that bothers me, or some of the ways my disease affects me, is getting around other people like me. Getting around people who found a way out. Getting around people who don't use anymore. Who found a way from addiction into recovery. Like, This last time, man, my using brought me to the doorstep of suicide. It brought me to the doorstep because I had been clean for 8 years before this last time. And for the life of me, I was like, how does this thing continue to resurface? Like, I lost everything. I lost a wife. I lost a business. I lost my cars. I lost everything I owned. I lost everything in that relapse. And at the end of the day, my best thought was, why don't you just end it all? That was my best thought. You ain't gonna get this right. There's no hope for you. This thing keeps resurfacing, right? So what is it about you that you can't stay stopped? What is it about you that makes you the exception when the 12-step model says that recovery is possible? What's making it impossible for you? So this last time, I realized that sometimes people can't go with you, where you're going. So I had to separate from my marriage. I had to walk away from a person that I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, right? I had to walk away from that union. I had to go against the grain and do things differently than what I ever thought that I would do. I had to stop running my life. I had to surrender. I had to give up. And I had to openly admit, look, man, I don't even know how to live. I don't have a clue of what it takes for me to live a successful life without the use of drugs. So I play a part in my demise every time. I play a part in it. I can't blame anybody outside of me. Like I was saying, when I was a kid, if I had a man in my life when I was a kid to let me know that the decisions you make today are going to affect you many years down the line, it would have gave me the opportunity to learn how to make more effective decisions about my life. So here I am, grown man, 54 years old at the time, making decisions that were counterproductive to where I wanted to go, and as a result, this last time I went back to the source of my allergy, because addiction, drugs is an allergy for me. Every time I use, I get the same exact results: homelessness, joblessness, pennilessness, uselessness, hopelessness. All of this stuff comes to me when I put drugs in me. Oh, it starts out at the top tier, like I'm where I want to be. I got the type of people that I want to be around me, the nice looking girls, and all of it. It starts out like that, but it always progresses, and then it gets lower, from the places that I'm using in, to the people that I'm hanging around, to the places that I got to go to get it. It all deteriorates.
And that's just rock bottom.
Yes. And after that, there's nobody around. It's just me. Isolation. Total isolation.
Solitude.
Yes. And that's when I'm at my lowest point. Because now I'm stuck with me and my own thoughts. I'm stuck with me with the self-loathing, right? You did it again. Look at you now. Like, look where you were. Now look at you now. So I got to that point again of wanting to end it all. And I don't know, I went into treatment. It was divine intervention that I went into treatment. And this time around, I said, you know what, I'm going to surrender everything. I'm not going to try to orchestrate this journey. I'm not going to try to manipulate it. I'm not going to put my hands in it. They when I went into the treatment facility, they asked me, are you committed to staying for the whole term? I'm like, yeah. At first, when I first came in, I was like, maybe I'll stay here like 30, 60 days. But they asked me, in case management, they asked me, are you committed to staying through the whole journey? And meditating on the condition that I came in there in, I realized that I needed the whole package. Like I didn't need to leave one day earlier than was given me. I didn't need to leave. I needed to get everything, man, that I came there for. You know, during the run of my life, man, I contracted the virus, man, and the virus has been a part of my life since 2004.
We're talking about
the HIV virus, yeah. I tested positive, and through heterosexual activity, I tested positive, and it's still stigmatized a lot, and you know. But I stay in care. I may be healthier than most African American men who are walking around in society now, you know, who don't have HIV.
You figured like a lot of times that situation was contributed to from drug usage.
Well, it definitely, my drug use definitely led me to the person that I contracted it from. My drug use did that. It did. And my inability to make more informed decisions about practicing safe sex really was the catalyst that caused me to contract the virus, you know. But as I said, I live with it. I'm not dying with it. I live with it. And part of me having the virus was the reason why I was able to get the care that I needed to get myself back on this side of the track. You know what I'm saying? There was a facility available for me to go to, you know, and get the help and the care that I needed, and to get back under doctors' care, get back on the medication, and to be my own healthcare advocate, to advocate for myself, you know. I changed my whole lifestyle this time around, from what I eat to exercising to, you know, I stopped smoking cigarettes, man. I gave up the cigarettes, man, and I haven't looked back, you know. I'm 56. I'll be 57 next month, you know. I'll be 57 next month, and you know, the type of life that I lived, man. I didn't think that I had an opportunity to make it to 21. You know, with the way things were going, like I didn't tell you that most of the childhood friends that I had, they began killing each other when this dope game opened up, and for territory, for street cred, you know, for power, for you know, they wanted exclusive rights to sell over here, and if you got caught selling over here, you were murdered. Like I lost a lot of childhood friends that I grew up with. I'm talking about sandbox guys, man.
So do you see a difference now with the youth? Like what do you say to the youth now, because they have so much accessibility to different things like social media and a lot of the violence going on now?
Back then, the neighborhood, the village, still played a role in influencing the child. Even though I went my own way, the OGs in our neighborhood, they didn't allow us to play with guns at a certain age. You can play with guns at 12, 13, 14. You ain't had no business being around a gun at that age, right? You ain't had no business driving no car without no license at that age. You couldn't hang up on the block at that age. If you wasn't in school during school hours, they were gonna put a foot in your butt. You know what I'm saying? So the OGs kind of like were like the vanguard of the community that I grew up in. If nobody invests in the development of the youth, if nobody put seeds inside the youth to let them know, man, you bigger You bigger than that.
And you think you would have benefited from that if somebody was in your life at that time?
Yes.
Growing up.
I know I would have. That's what we're missing in our communities. You know, that's what makes the social constructs imbalanced. The black man, he's not present in his own community. I mean, there's some of us out here. But for the most part, and I'm a part of an organization of black men, right? And we're making headways in our community. We're addressing gun violence. We're addressing juvenile delinquency. We're addressing a lot of those issues that people look over with a minimum of concern as black men. Why I take a position in that is because I know I contributed to the condition that the community is in now.
So you feel you have the right to speak on it?
I have the right to speak on it. I was a part of the problem. I need to be a part of the solution now. Like a lot of brothers don't feel like they owe any debt to their society. I know I do.
Or their community.
Or their community. I know I do. You know, and I think me being spared from my experiences, because I don't have to be here. Like, I didn't do anything to merit being here still. I played Russian roulette with my life for many years through the drug use. Like, I OD'd and things of that nature. You know, I've been in many dangerous situations, man, chasing this drug addiction. So, you know, some of them think they don't owe a debt, but I know I do. You know, I know I do, and because I contributed to the community being in the condition that it's in, you know, and the imbalance comes in with the men is absent, you know.